PhD in Progress, episode 21. This week we talked to Alexandra Badra, a neuroscience postdoc, about the postdoc life and the differences between the US and European PhD programs. Let's go!
Finishing eating his delicious baked goods for breakfast that his girlfriend was so kindly nice to bring in for everyone. Welcome back to the PhD in Progress podcast, where we talk about your education, your career, and your life. I'm Jason.
I'm Nikhil.
How you doing, Nikhil?
I'm doing well, Jason.
Yeah?
Yeah. I've got a couple of updates, actually.
Really?
So I have set a defense date.
Yes!
The light at the end of the tunnel has appeared. And it's hugely motivating. I feel like I've been getting a lot done in the past couple of weeks.
Yeah? It's been motivating, just lab-wise, or writing-wise, or all types of wises?
I feel like doing work because I know it's towards something.
Yes, that's how I feel, too.
Mm-hmm. So what's new with you?
I don't have a date yet, but my paper, which is getting bigger and bigger by the day, which is good, actually feels like it's saying something for once, which is really nice.
So this is going to be one of those, 12-figure cell extravaganzas, right?
Let's not say cell.
Okay.
Let's not say 12 figures either, but it's up there. It's more than I thought it was going to be.
Journal of Physiology.
And potentially more impactful. So that feels good. And that's been motivational, too. So while my date is still hanging somewhere, I will get it down, and it'll be good.
Yeah.
All right.
And I have to say, I do feel a little bit guilty for not putting more time into this podcast endeavor, but...
So do I.
I'm
with
there's only so much we can do.
It's hard. I just ran into a friend, and I was like... They were asking, how's the podcast doing? I'm like, it's hard, because we're doing so many different things. Writing papers, trying to write a thesis, scheduling dates. I gave a talk at Temple a couple weeks ago that went pretty well, I think.
Nice.
Mm-hmm. And just all the things that entail finishing up a PhD take forever. So speaking of finishing PhDs, today we're going to talk about postdocing. In case you decide that you might want to do an academic postdoc, we have one of our friends here, Alexandra Badra.
Hi, it's nice to be here. Thanks for the invite. Yeah. I was really excited when Nikhil approached me because I wished I had someone telling me all the things that I know now when I was finishing a PhD. So I hope that I can, answer some questions and be helpful to some of you.
Well, that's exactly, if you go back and listen to episode 1 of the podcast, we talk about our motivation for doing it, and that's exactly our motivation. It's like there's so much that we know now that would have been helpful throughout the whole process. And so thanks so much for being on the show. We look forward to conversing with you about your particular career choices and why you're a postdoc now and all that fun stuff. So I guess first maybe if you want to tell our guests about who you are, what kind of things you study, what your interests are, what you've done in terms of your PhD and all that.
Sure. So I'm a third-year postdoc at Princeton Neuroscience Institute and Sam Wong Laboratory. And I did my PhD in the Netherlands, in Rotterdam. I'm Polish, as you can probably tell from my accent. And so I studied the cerebellum. I had also studied the cerebellum for my PhD, so this is something that I think I'll try to study for the rest of my scientific career, because this is something that I really am passionate about. And I think we'll talk a little bit about it later, why I chose this lab for a postdoc. But one of the criteria when I was finishing a PhD was looking into labs that were also working on the cerebellum. So I work on the cognitive aspects of the cerebellum. And basically right now I'm doing 2 projects. One is related to cerebellum role in autism spectrum disorder. And the other one is sensory processing in granule cell layer, which is this small, teeny tiny cells in cerebellum that get all the inputs.
Very cool.
So actually, I think most of our audience may not be familiar with the cerebellum. So if you want to explain what it is and why it's important in like 2 minutes?
Sure. It's this thing that's always omitted if you read papers from fMRI groups.
That's a good definition.
If you don't see it in the paper, that's that. Yeah. But jokes aside, it's this structure in the back of your head, which primarily and historically has been indicated as being responsible for motor control and motor coordination. So we know that if you damage your cerebellum during your adult life, you will become ataxic. And if you have like a stroke in the cerebellum, you will have problems with balance and coordination. So actually during my PhD, most of the studies I did were about motor coordination and eye movements because cerebellum also controls gaze. But now there's more and more piling evidence that is also important in cognition. And it's been implicated as damage to this structure has been implicated as a risk factor in cognitive disorders, especially in autism spectrum disorder.
That's really interesting now, especially because all the autism talk in the last decade or so.
Yeah, so I have to say I'm primarily a fundamental researcher, so I'm really interested in how does it work? And how is it even possible that it's doing the things that it's doing? And it's super cool if you can then relate it to something applicable. So like, for example, ASD, which is a problem in our society. But, and this is also interesting when it comes, I think we'll talk also later about it when it comes to funding, is that you, in the back of your head, you also always have to keep in mind how the public perceives your research. So you might be interested, or I'm really interested in, like, how does the brain work? Like, how is it possible that we are capable of having this conversation even though I'm, like, from Poland and you guys are from here, and yet we can talk about the brain and
because you're willing to learn English and
yeah, but like, but yeah. So how what's in the black box? And I'm more interested on the fundamental level. But I think that this is totally legitimate that the public is interested in, okay, you want to know how it works, but I want to know how you can now apply this knowledge to help me or my child or, society. Yeah, so this is something that I think a lot of scientists don't like because they say, oh, we have to write it for the sake of getting money. But I think that it's actually a legitimate thing to think about it, how you want to combine it, not to study something in a vacuum.
So you sound like quintessential biologist or scientist, really. You like understanding.
Yeah, I like to know, like, why?
So
why does it do it?
Going on that note, like, what was your motivation to go into a postdoc?
So in the third year, it took me 4.5 years to finish my PhD, and in the third year I had a famous or infamous PhD dip when I was, about to quit. I think we've all been there. And,
yes.
I'm sure your audience.
Why am I here?
Yeah. Why am I doing this? Will it end ever? And how? And I was actually really close to quitting my PhD. But then I decided that actually, I had like this moment of epiphany, and it's kind of a funny story. So I was down and kind of depressed, and one of my colleagues saw that, and he used to work in a monkey lab. So one of these days, I come to work and I find this jar on my desk, and it's a monkey head in formaldehyde.
Oh my God.
And he says, I thought that it will cheer you up. So I put it in a glass. It was like in a plastic jar. So I put it in a glass jar in formaldehyde on my desk.
I do not understand European sense of humor.
And like every time I would look at it, I would be like, this is the only job in the world where I can keep a monkey brain on my desk, and people who come in think that it's a cool thing to have. And I know, okay, so there's been obviously other motivations, but this is one of the things that kept me through. I was like, this is, the only job where we're at the frontiers. That you're not, yeah, it's true. You do a lot of the things that are repetitive, and a lot of the times things fail. But you sometimes get this 1 or 2% of the times when it works, and when it works, it's just amazing. And I've been doing it for 8 years now, because I also did some internship during my master's in the lab. So I had been doing lab work for a while now. And even now, when I have an experiment that works and I have this feeling like, oh my God, I might be the first person like on the planet out of 7 billion people to see it. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that this feeling can be easily found in any other type of job. So
yeah, I mean, that's really important. It's like, for you, it's the best way to express the way you are. Right? It's kind of one of the only jobs that allows you to express that feeling of, I'm seeing this. I'm the one person who's seen this. And now I get to tell people about it.
And then sharing it.
Yeah.
So I love to talk about science. I also really like to teach. So when I was finishing a PhD, I decided, like, I actually would really like to have a lab. And I actually really would like to be a professor. And the only way to do that is to do a postdoc. Or two, yes. We can talk about that. I'm gonna go and do a second postdoc in another lab next year, which I'm actually excited about, because I think that currently I'm not yet ready to have my own lab. I think I need a little bit more time and a little bit more experience. I think that, so I'm in the third year now, so I think having a 4 or 5 years postdoc is. It's good. It's, well, I need it.
Yeah.
And my publication list also needs it, not to sugarcoat things.
Right.
Well, it's kind of good to understand what you feel you need and be able to apply that, as opposed to being forced into something.
There's a lot of pressure. So, for example, a lot of my friends now apply for assistant professor positions, and I get this feeling like, oh, maybe I should apply too. What's wrong with me? Why am I not applying? And I guess this is something that you get when you're finishing your PhD and you see some people like, they're already done and I'm still here. But you have to remember that the more publications you have and the better they are, the more chances you get to get funding, which will make you more relaxed. So for me now, I probably could get an assistant professor position somewhere in some small lab, but then I would be struggling to get any funding, to get my lab going. So I'd rather wait a little bit longer, get more publications, and then get a bigger grant, like a startup grant, and then, be a little bit more relaxed about it.
So I guess the takeaway is, when you're at the end of your PhD or when you're doing your postdoc, there's this fear of missing out, or FOMO.
Yeah.
You see your colleagues and peers being successful and you're like, wow, there's no reason I can't be successful too. But then at the end of the day, you have to play the game and decide what the best move is for your own career.
Yeah, and it's hard because there's not a lot of people who can advise you. So I feel like when you're in a PhD level, you at least have your committee, a few of the advisors. When you're a postdoc, it's you have your PI and you can discuss career options with him or her, but access to advisors is more limited because you are considered a mature scientist. So it's expected of you to make those decisions.
So let's dive a little bit deeper into this decision-making process, because I think this is a really important skill to develop as a scientist, is how to make career decisions. So I think one of the most important ones is, which lab do you choose to go to as a postdoc? So can you talk a little bit about your reasons for choosing the lab you did and what kinds of things in general people should think about when making that decision?
Yes, so I think for me it's also a little bit different probably from your audience who are American, because I did my PhD in Europe, and in Europe, if you do your PhD there, it's actually very beneficial to go abroad, especially to the US, because funding agencies appreciate if you take that step. So if you already decided that you want to do a postdoc, then it's good to think about, okay, I actually want to go abroad, because then if I want to come back, they're more prone to award people who had taken this step. So that's one thing. But another thing is I actually chose this lab specifically for techniques. So I knew that I did like in vivo electrophysiology, so I would be like sticking electrodes in mice and recording their electrical activity and during some behavior. So I wanted to expand that, and I wanted to learn calcium imaging. So I was specifically and patching. So I was specifically looking at labs with those two techniques. So my choice was cerebellum as a structure and techniques, and a little bit less. I was a little bit fuzzy about the question. So the question, and I think retrospectively, I wish that I had it more set up the first year of my postdoc, because I feel like in the first year of my postdoc, I procrastinated. And I was like, I would be doing this, and maybe not procrastinated, I just did too many things at the same time. And unfortunately it turned out good, because I ultimately learned the technique, and I participated in a paper, which I ended up sharing an authorship on, first authorship on, because I contributed a lot to it. But again, I think this is personal. So if you have a question that you really, really want to answer, then you can look into labs that are working on it. But I think that it's really important also to change a little bit. So if you're not changing your main field, so like I, for example, stayed in cerebellum, but I wanted to change the techniques that I was applying. And maybe some other people, you can also think about, I know that there are people who change fields. So they go from, cancer to immunology, or immunology or biochemistry to neuroscience or something like that, right?
We even know people who've gone from like physics to biology.
Oh, physics like physics, that's very common, right? That's very, very common.
So is the sort of guiding principle like what you see yourself doing as a PI? Do you have a vision for that?
When you're finishing your PhD, or like right now, you mean?
How's it evolved over time?
Oh yeah, so I don't think I had a vision of what I wanted to do when I finished my PhD as a PI. I had a vision of what I really still wanted to learn. I felt like, okay, I now am a little bit more mature. I produced the paper, and I think this is also a really good point, is that when you're at the end of your PhD and you finally graduate and you have your thesis done, you hopefully publish or at least submit the paper, you do get this feeling of accomplishment. And this is something important, because then you see, okay, I can do it, and now I just have to do it on a shorter time scale. But I did not think back then of what my lab is going to be. I was more thinking of, okay, I still really like cerebellum. There's still a lot of things that are interesting. But to answer all those interesting questions, I really need those techniques. And I really want to know them. And I want to know how to do them by myself. So that's how I show. And I looked at... So it's good to look at least at 3 labs. I would say 3 is a minimum. I interviewed in 3, and I basically had another 2 Skype interviews. So in total, I had like 5 interviews. And this is important. Don't just go to like one lab, because you don't know what's if this is going to be the best fit. So interview and look around a little bit. Cool. And do your research. So I knew exactly, you never know exactly, but I also talked to former lab members and back then current lab members on like, what is the situation in the lab. I also came from a huge lab, so I wanted to choose a small lab, because I wanted to have a small group rather than having a lab of 30 people. Mm-hmm. So those are all those things that I think are important when you'll be choosing a lab.
Okay, you want to fill in all the gaps in your knowledge, whether it's technical or question related, and you want to choose like a sort of different experience from your PhD to broaden your training.
Yeah, I think so. And obviously, let's be honest. It also helps if you choose a lab in Columbia or Harvard or MIT and again, this is not mostly for. I'm not saying that other labs in smaller universities don't have good quality research. They do, but unfortunately, funding agencies don't care. So
what do they care about?
Yeah, like if you, for example, I just got a grant back in the Netherlands, and I think part of it was also because I'm now a postdoc at Princeton University, and it's a really good brand to have when you apply for. And it's unfortunate, but I'm just honest with you guys. If there are two good labs, and one is in Harvard and one is in Wisconsin, and they both want you, then you have to think really, really hard if you can produce super cool papers in Wisconsin to make up for the fact that you won't have a Harvard brand on your CV.
Yeah. And it's kind of like it's how academia starts mirroring the quote-unquote real world. Right?
Yeah.
If you have an internship at Google versus an internship at some IT shop.
And I don't like it.
It's probably not fair. It's not even reflective of the skills or the person necessarily. It's just kind of the dicey roll, and it's nice to be at Princeton. Like people actually hear it and pay a little more attention than
but
other schools necessarily. But
and resources. Think also in terms of resources.
Yeah.
Here, most of the PIs have enough money, or there are centers, shared equipment. That it's not a problem to. Oh, I want to do light sheet microscopy, or I want to do 2-photon microscopy, or I want to get some reagents. It's not a problem, right? And so this also is something that can aid your research. And again, it's not fair, but it's just.
So I think you're touching upon an interesting topic, which is funding for postdocs. So you mentioned that some postdocs get paid by their PI directly, and then some have outside fellowships, and so. Can you talk a little bit about some of the advantages of these different funding sources, or I guess everybody's trying to get it. So.
So I had been funded up till, I'm still actually funded on my PI's grants. And starting in February, I'll be on my own grant. And it's definitely beneficial to have your own fellowship because, people say you're more independent. I don't know about that.
Well, what do they mean by that?
That you have your own project and your PI cannot tell you what to do because you can say, I got money for this, so I'm only doing this. No. The only good things about having your fellowship is you have a job security for, let's say, 3 years. Because as a postdoc, your job gets renewed by yearly basis. I don't know if everyone knows that, but in most of the places, your PI can tell you, I want to have you for 3 or 4 years. But if you don't have a fellowship, basically it's renewed on a yearly basis. And if he runs out of funding or she runs out of funding, then they will not keep you. So job security is one thing. The other thing, it's extremely important to show that you are able to get those fellowships if you want to become a PI. So the track record of getting money is really important. And again, this is something I feel like I'm sounding like I'm in some company or but unfortunately, again, the more grants you get, the easier it is to get new grants. And let's face it, it's also a really good validation. It definitely helps you to stay motivated because it's someone recognizes it and someone believes in me and someone thinks that I can do it. So it's on all of those levels. It's really good to apply. So this is, let me see. This is the 4th grant that I applied. So obviously I didn't get 3. Mm-hmm. So I got 1 out of 4. So it's very common when you start your postdoc that you apply for fellowships. And it's also very common not to get the first or the second that you apply for. So don't be discouraged. You just have to...
It's good training for being a PI and writing grants.
This is also a part of a job, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that everybody should apply. Even if your PI tells you, I have money, don't apply. try even like a year fellowship or something.
And you should be doing this as a grad student too. If you don't have a fellowship, you should be applying for them, at least if you're in the U.S. and in the sciences. I don't know too much about outside, but...
So, see, I was totally unprepared. Like, my first grant proposal when I was applying for a postdoctoral fellowship was horrible, because I never wrote a grant when I was a grad student. I had never written one, and in Europe, you are not even encouraged. I would say there's very few options for grad students, if any. You can, like, write and ask them to support your thesis printing or something like that, but there are not, or external fellowships. So if you want to go abroad for half a year, then you can apply for a fellowship. But there's nothing for like internal PhDs.
For in grad school, at least in sciences, there's the big National Science Foundation one that you try to get. It's pretty prestigious, and everyone applies for it, but it's really good practice for it in general. And then you try throughout your grad school career if your school is supportive of that. Mm-hmm. Hopefully they are, because it's just really good preparation for a career in general.
Well, and you get, reviews and comments.
Well, you get reviews, you get comments, you get practice, you get just the ability to start talking about the science that you propose to do, which is really important.
It's important to get feedback. I agree. It's really important to get feedback. And it's really great when you get it. Mm-hmm. Good feeling. So
we touched a little bit on the differences between the sort of U.S. system for science training and the European system. Mm-hmm. And I think you're in a unique position to talk about this since you've experienced both in some sense. You didn't do your PhD in the U.S., but you kind of know what that's about. And you kind of know what doing a postdoc is like in Europe, and you're going to be one soon. Maybe we can talk a little bit about some of the differences in how science training is done in Europe and here. Some of the pros, some of the cons. What are your thoughts?
So, there definitely are differences. I don't know how it is. Everywhere in Europe. I can only say how it is in the Netherlands, where I did my PhD. But Germany is pretty similar. France has similarities. I know that Italy and Spain are a little bit different because of the current funding situation. So it's, for example, much harder to get a postdoc position there, because if you don't have your own fellowship, because there's so little money there. But let's see. The main difference for grad students, I think the main difference is that there aren't that many mandatory classes back in Europe that you have to take. So here, I think it's also a different system, because in Europe you have to have a master's degree in order to enroll in a PhD program. So you have 2 years of your master's, like extra training. So when you get into a PhD program, you mostly do lab work. And the courses I think I had like one mandatory class that I had to take, like literally one, because I had my master's. So here it's very different, and I think that it's much better in the US because of all those courses and classes that you have to take, but that actually really help you throughout your PhD and to write your thesis.
And then maybe the professors have an idea of what background you should be having.
Exactly. So in Europe, you don't have rotations either. So now they're starting doing it when you can rotate a little bit in different labs, but usually you just apply for a PhD position within a university or within an institute with a PI. And then you go on an interview. So I had like 3 interviews back when I applied for a PhD position, and I interviewed for a specific position, for a specific lab. Actually, basically also having more or less defined project already. I mean, the project changes, and that's very, that's common, that you start with something and then it morphs into something else. but you start with something more or less defined. So I like the American system better because it gives you more freedom, and it gives you more freedom to explore what you like and what you're good at. So that is something that I would definitely say, US 1, Europe 0.
Now we're...
Like if you were score, then I would say this is better here.
So let's stop it now, because America's winning.
I know, right?
Let's not talk about soccer.
The others, but I do have to say that the amount of pressure, maybe. So again, I haven't been a PhD student here.
It's kind of hard to tell because you only have limited experience with certain PIs.
But for example, with postdocs, I can tell you that all my friends who are postdocing in Europe have more vacation, and which they also take advantage of, than me.
As opposed to here, where in many people's labs you feel guilty.
Yes,
There's that weird...
It's not even that we don't have vacation days; it's just so frowned upon to take them, and you feel under so much pressure if you do go away for a few days. And this is something so I feel like the work-life balance is very, very skewed in the US, and I think that it's more balanced in Europe. And those people still get assistant professor position if they do want to, and they still are group leaders, etc., etc. So I don't know if this is really necessary, what the kind of lifestyle that we're having here in the US, if this is really necessary to succeed, or is this just some byproduct of everyone pushing so hard? And it's fine. I mean, I'm doing it now, and but it definitely takes a toll.
Yeah, I think it's a byproduct of culture in general. It kind of goes outside of academia.
Yeah, you see it in the corporate world.
Yeah.
Also. It's not just academia.
No, definitely not. Yeah. But I kind of thought that academia should be a bit different.
Yeah.
No, it's very demanding, and I know people who quit, and I know people who choose different career paths, because at least I have a few friends who had been very successful at their postdoc in the sense that they were producing and they had fellowships. My best friend actually, and she quit because she said I also want to live, and if I need to work 80 hours a week, then at least I want to make $100,000. You know what I mean? I'm just saying it's if I'm already working so hard, then at least I also should be rewarded for it. Monetarily.
She's in consulting now, right?
Yeah, she's in consulting now. Yes, she's
so
very.
She's still
now she does work out.
Yeah, but again, that's what she was saying. But she says that with consulting, for example, then on the weekend or when the project is done, she goes home and she doesn't think about it. Whereas here, you're working on the project and then you're submitting the paper, and then there's the process of writing, the process of submitting, the process of resubmitting. It's you're constantly, and you know it from your PIs, right? And you know it from yourself. You're constantly submerged in your work.
There really aren't that many boundaries for you when, at least what I've seen in grad school, is that it's your life. You kind of sign on for your life to be this, as opposed to what you're saying maybe in Europe, where the postdoc is kind of like your job, and it's more...
You still have to be committed and work hard, but you can... It's... Everyone understands if you're taking... So in the Netherlands, for example, most of the grad students and postdocs take at least 2 consecutive weeks off in the summer, and a lot of them take 3 weeks off. And it's not an... I know!
I did that once in grad school, and it was glorious, and I never did it again. Right? I felt a little bad, but it was at the beginning of grad school, so it's okay.
Yeah.
I know, but here, I take a week off sometimes, and I feel horrible that I'm
horrible.
not. I know, right? I know, but I usually write papers.
So was this one of the big motivating factors for you to go back to the Netherlands for your second postdoc? Maybe we can talk about that decision. You applied for all these grants and you got this, amazing fellowship. So was it? Did that work-life balance play a role in your decision, or was it just?
So I'm married. I have a husband, and
whatever he thinks doesn't matter.
well, hence why I'm here. But ouch! Oh my gosh! I hope he's not going to listen to it. No.
Oh, well, no, listens, it's okay.
No, so he's Dutch. His family is in the Netherlands, and we made this deal when I decided to go and do a postdoc in the U.S. It was kind of like our decision, but obviously it was more my decision. He's a scientist too, so but when I left, he was still doing his PhD. And we said, okay, so this time I'm making a decision. This time I'm saying we're going there. Mm-hmm. And he actually ultimately moved here, mostly because I'm here. And I said, okay, next time we'll try to make it more your way. And I know that he really wants to go back to the Netherlands. And I like the Netherlands a lot. I feel like this is my home, kind of. I lived there for a long time. My in-laws are there. And so I said, look, I'm going to apply to different things. And if I get something that's really good and in the Netherlands, then I'm going to take it, even if I get something equally good in the US.
Okay.
So, so for me, I guess it was a work-life balance in the sense that, I have
a husband.
I have a husband and he's my life too. Exactly. So I took under consideration what he wanted. And also maybe it's worth mentioning for all of you, your female
You've got
listeners,
a couple of those, yeah.
Is that if you think
Binders of women.
Yeah, I don't have any children, and I don't know if I
have children.
Will have children in the future. But if you towards the third year or fourth year of your postdoc, you're usually at the age where you might start to think about having family. And being a female and having a kid in the US versus being a female and having a kid, and a scientist female, right?
Uh-huh.
In Norway, France, Netherlands, Germany, basically almost anywhere in Europe that's a humongous difference. So like holidays and all the other things you can be like, I can live with. But when you think of starting a family, and again, like, I don't know if I'm going to go that way, but I would like to have an option. And the Netherlands are way more supportive.
Yeah.
When it comes
to
those things.
Basically everywhere else in the developed world is a little more friendly towards raising a family, like raising a young family.
Yeah. I think here it's pretty bad.
Here, what's the legality? I think it's like you get a few weeks, like 4 weeks.
So you don't get any maternity leave at all. What you get is a disability leave.
Oh.
So all of the maternity leave is basically under disability leave, and it depends on the university or an institute how much of that you can get. Nice. And usually it's 6 week-ish, but it also starts like at the moment of you give birth. So
when you're 9 and a half months waddling around.
Yeah, you can take sick days or holiday days. You don't get any disability leave before that.
I know many. It kind of comes down to a PI level when it's coming to being a postdoc or a grad student. Yeah,
but let's say, for example, in my case, like I would like to be a PI hopefully in like the next 3 years, let's say.
Okay.
Right. If I do decide to start a family in the Netherlands, I get on my fellowship, I get an extra 8 months paid. My fellowship gets extended for 8 months, even if I come back to work like a week after having a baby. Like I can still get an extra. Mm-hmm. I will get an extra 8 months of funding, and also all the deadlines for all the next fellowships. Because like let's say you have a startup fellowship, and then you have all the other ones. Other fellowships to like start your own lab, mm-hmm. where you normally have like you have to apply within 7 or 8 years from getting your PhD degree. In Europe, that's how it's structured. There you get you had a baby, you get an extra year.
I think we need to revisit this during another episode. Yeah. That's really interesting. I had no idea it was that different. Like I knew the U.S. wasn't really that supportive. At least the laws in the U.S. aren't.
It's also the culture. I mean, if you look at the PIs in our department, And the women who have children, when they have their baby, they're back at work, less than a month after giving birth.
I'll say
by choice.
But like, my PI is very supportive of the ladies I've had in my lab who've given birth, and she was like, great, enjoy your family. When you feel ready to come back, like, come and do that. But it's really
special.
That's at the boss level. That's what I'm trying to get at.
It's special.
It's individual.
It's very special. Where it's like in the Netherlands, they don't have an option. Even if your PI is like hates kids, hates women, he cannot say it, and he cannot say like, you have to be at work. This is the thing that you have to do.
Wow.
They cannot do that. So again, like, this is, I'm not saying I'm going to take advantage of it, but it's nice that it comes in a package, right?
All right.
We want to be respectful of your time.
Yeah.
We know you have other things to do, and it's getting close to the time. So maybe to wrap this up, if you could tell us, what advice would you give your former self? So if you could talk to your PhD self and then also to yourself at the start of your postdoc, are there any specific pieces of advice that you would give?
Okay, so I would say definitely think of a question. Not just broadly what interests you, but how it can be sculpted into a good question. And I think that writing a proposal, for example, for a fellowship helps with that. And so this is one thing. And another thing is it's something that you have to keep in mind, that there's no ultimate end goal. So basically, let me put it correctly, like, you think, oh, okay, I'm just going to do a postdoc, or I'm just going to do this, and then I'm going to be a PI, or then I'm going to be fulfilled, and then I'm going to be something. And it's still something that I'm learning how to do, but you should just enjoy the ride. Enjoy, getting a PhD, getting into a postdoc, learning new things. Because I feel like when I was about to enter the postdoc, I was like, okay, so now I'm done, I'm going to graduate, and now I'm only going to do this 3 years, and then it's going to be...
And then it's like, life is going to be amazing after those 3 years.
Yeah, it's kind of... And it's a very... It's very false, and it's not a good attitude to have. And if you have this attitude, that maybe you shouldn't do a postdoc, because it's tough. Let's face it. Sometimes it's tough, and you work really long hours, and you're everyone expects that you know already everything, because it's like a magic thing. You get your PhD, and all of a sudden you're an expert. And all of a sudden you're expected to produce within something that before your PI would be like, oh, I understand, let's do some preliminary data, and I understand your experiments are failing, and then all of a sudden you become a postdoc, and you're like, where's the data? You have a PhD now.
Because once you have those letters and you have that question, now you have to answer that question.
And you have to produce.
Or else you're
and there's no excuse.
Doctor.
Exactly. Like, why else, So you have to be prepared for that, and you have to be able to also enjoy it and enjoy that period. And it's hard. But I would that's I think.
No, that's fantastic.
Do you have any specific advice for European PhD students? Because we actually have a few that listen, and they always ask for a little advice, and maybe that'll be the last note that we end on.
Moving abroad is not horrible, and you can make...
That's right, America, not horrible.
No, I think that I would encourage people to do that. It's a great experience. I would also, that's why I know that, for example, for you guys, it's normal. You live on the East Coast, and then you move to the West Coast, and it's like moving from Germany to Portugal, right? And I would, or perhaps maybe even Poland to
More
Portugal.
like Iceland.
Iceland to Portugal. Oh, okay.
It's far.
Okay, see, so it's far. Good that I don't study geography, because that would be really embarrassing. But do that. It broadens your horizons, and it makes life fun. And I would say, if you do that, just try to make your new place home. So when I now say I come home, I think of Princeton. So I say, and it's important. So that would be my advice.
Okay. Well, thanks so much,
Thanks,
Alexandra.
it was
This has
awesome.
been
No, you were awesome.
fantastic.
Thank you.
It was really cool.
A very special thanks to Alexandra for talking with us. Do you have more questions about being a postdoc? Get in touch with us by emailing feedback@phdinprogress.com or leaving a comment on phdinprogress.com/21. If you'd like to help out the show, the best possible way to do so is to leave an honest rating and review in the iTunes Store. You can find the link at the top of the show notes. Each rating and review helps boost our visibility, so thank you. You can also help contribute to the cost of producing and distributing the show by backing us at patreon.com, where even $1 a month supports the show. Also, let us know you're listening. Say hi on Twitter. We're at PhD Podcast. Finally, all this information and more can be found at phdinprogress.com.
This is the only job in the world where I can keep a monkey brain on my desk and people who come in think that it's a cool thing to have.